Hello and welcome to another special episode of Mixer. Today we're joined by a very special guest, K.Wilson, also known as Kieran, and he's here today to talk a little bit more about his journey, his career, and his experience so far in the DJing world. So I guess what would be great then just to really understand a bit about you is what is your story?
Um, where do I start? My story is I was, I was just music obsessed from a very young age. Like a lot of DJs, like a lot of people in the music industry, there's just something about music that captures you. It was, I have to be completely honest, it was my dad. So my dad, he was a massive, massive music fan. Similar to me, he started young. So for him, it was sound system culture. So he was buying a lot of Studio One records, and then him and his brother and two of their friends, they built a sound system, and then they were traveling around East London, putting on parties, playing events, and he was doing that all the way up until I was born. I remember being probably around 4 years old and him getting records together, pulling the turntables out. Um, it was actually one night in particular I remember, and I know that he was absolutely livid, but he basically pulled the turntable out and it was on the floor. And it was the last thing that he had to load into the car. And me, as a kid, went over to the turntable and I'm spinning the platter. And he had the cartridge on there, and I lifted it and put it on the platter when there's no record on there, and it just rips the cartridge off and
No,
destroyed it. And he
just
came back
before.
in, just before he's going to go and play. So this is well before the days of Amazon Prime. Saturday at like 5:30 when everything is closing. So he was frantically phoning around all his friends. Have you got another cartridge? Like, please, I'll come and pick
The
it up
panic,
now.
the panic with no Amazon. I
Yeah,
feel like it's such an underrated thing. Even in London, though, like everything's on your doorstep. You can imagine back
take it for
then.
granted.
Yeah.
Take it for
Like,
granted.
what do you actually do?
And now I know the feeling of, well, all DJs, we all have it, that feeling before you're about to walk out the door and you go and play a gig. The the nerves, the excitement, the anxiety, like the mixture of feelings that you're feeling, the last thing you want is something like that. And I was
Absolutely.
just there like, no, you don't.
No, I can imagine. Like, you're right. There's so much going through your head, and there's so many small things that are essential to the success of the night. And if one of them is like, even if it just throws you off a bit and you don't feel like on point for it, we can imagine how much that. So did you learn a lesson there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely learned a lesson. It's a very fine balance, like before you go out and play. But um, so I saw my dad doing that, and he was always listening to music at home. On his days off, he'd go record shopping. I'd go with him, and at first, I didn't appreciate it. I was young, and I was like, "Can we go home yet?" And then once I got a bit older, and I found that appreciation for music, and he'd taught me essentially how to listen to music and pick out the detail in it, I became more interested. So we'd go record shopping together occasionally, and then I started listening to a lot of uh, jungle and drum and bass because of my uncles. So they were into jungle and drum and bass, and I kind of made that link. I realized that a lot of the stuff that was being sampled in jungle was old reggae tracks that my
Mm-hmm.
dad was playing.
Mm-hmm.
So I made that link, and it was more interesting because I'm a kid. It's a lot faster. It's more intense. It's like system overload sort of thing. So
Yeah.
that sort of captured my interest. And then my older sister was really into garage. So I was hearing jungle and drum and bass from my uncles, and then garage from my older sister. And then I think at that age, that's when I kind of had a bit more freedom to sort of delve into it by myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I was traveling to school, and there was a record shop where I grew up, Boogie Times, and I had to get the bus from outside the shop. So I'd go past it every single day. When I come back, the shop was open and they'd be playing like the latest garage tunes, and like
That's cool.
it's just absolutely spilling out into the street.
Yeah.
Um, and then my my best friend that I went to school with, we plucked up the courage to go in there one day, and that was it. Just kind of never looked back.
There.
Yeah, just started saving my lunch money, buying records. Didn't have any turntables to play them on.
It's classic.
Playing on my dad's turntable that was fixed by this point. Yeah, and it just went from there.
Fascinating. That's really, really interesting. It is weird how when you're a kid, things like that, they kind of just like go over your head.
Yeah.
And then it's not until you get a little bit older, you start to think, well, that's actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
You know, you start to like appreciate that. And you were saying your dad built the system, the sound system.
Yeah.
So
he told me this story of basically they played at, I can't remember where he said he played, but because they were quite young and a lot of the guys that had sound systems were a lot older, they kind of tried to take the mick a little bit. So they got this book in, they went and they played, and he said that the place was absolutely rammed. They knew that the guy putting on the party had made a decent amount of money, but then when it got to the end of the night, they didn't want to pay them. They tried to give them a $5 to split between 4 of them.
No.
And I know that obviously with inflation, $5 back then is a lot more than what it is now, but still a $5 is a $5.
Yeah.
So his brother and his 2 friends weren't impressed, and they had to like string down their sound system at the end of the night. And the guy who was putting on the party had a sound system, and he was off doing whatever. So they were like, okay, if you're not going to pay us, we're going to take some of your speaker boxes. So they took them, broke them down, and rebuilt this new speaker box in his friend's garage. But they built it so big that they couldn't get it out of the garage. So, yeah.
Must have been a strong like sound coming out of that then.
Yeah, like my dad he grew up in Forest Gate, so they had a basement in their house, and that's where they sort of like practice and play music. And he said that the sound system was like so powerful that it would just shake everything in the house. Like the plates would be like shaking out the cupboards and cups falling over
like
and all that sort
Jurassic
of stuff.
Park or something.
Yeah,
like so,
that sort of vibe. Yeah.
That's crazy. No, that's really, really interesting. And it is funny how that they were able to turn that negative into something that they could build on.
Yeah.
And then I suppose then you've established that understanding of music, at least in that way, where like jungle and drum and bass and garage, those influences are coming into play. You're at school when you're getting these vinyls and these records. What's the next step to DJing? Like how do you then?
So
what's after that?
The obsession was pirate radio. That was the big thing. It just, I don't know, everything to do with pirate radio to me at that age was just cool. Like the whole culture surrounding it, like the record shops, the music being played, the MCs, like there was a mystery to it. It was before like Instagram, Facebook, social media, all of that sort of stuff. At most, you'd maybe get Rewind magazine, and you might get a glimpse of like an established, well, not even established, but a more popular MC, maybe like a Wiley or a Dizzy Rascal, one of those. But this is even before that I was listening to pirate radio, so it was predominantly garage. And all I wanted to do was be on pirate radio. I just wanted to, so I was, backtrack a little bit, I was hearing these tracks being played on pirate radio. I was borrowing my sister's tapes that she was recording. I'd hear these tunes, and initially I wanted to hear more of it because it always felt like the DJ mixed out before it got to the good bit, or it felt like something else was coming. So I'd go to the record shop and be like, oh, I was listening to this station and this DJ was on and he played this tune. And for the most part, you'd have to stand there and hum the tune. I don't know whether it was a combination of them genuinely not knowing what track you were talking about, or whether they just wanted to have a laugh. But you'd have to hum the tune, and then they'd be like, oh yeah, that sounds like whatever producer. And they'd go and get it for you. You'd listen, you'd be like, yeah, that's the one. And I was just listening to them from end to end. And then I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to be able to like mix them together like they do on radio. And then my cousin had a set of decks. So Newmark used to make this thing, DJ in a box. So it was 2 turntables, little 2-channel mixer, and my cousin had it. And when I found out, I was like, oh, I wonder if he'll let me borrow it. So I phoned him and like asked very nicely, and eventually he was like, all right, go on then. So drove up to Kent to go and get these decks, came back, set them up in my room, and didn't really have a good idea of what I was doing or how it was supposed to work. But in my mind, I was like, all I have to do is make the 2 tunes sort of play together. So at this time, I was listening to like a lot of pirate radio, but then I also had DJ's Pure Garage 2 on CD. So I studied that. Like, I just analyzed
like the handbook.
The finer details of that CD. And I just went, right, so he's playing this song and he's lining it up and he's bringing it in. And then I used to go to the record shop as well. And there was a DJ that worked in there, Quick Draw, and he used to mix behind the counter. So I'd look around the counter, watch what he was doing, and then run home as quick as I could and try and replicate it.
That's quality.
Until I eventually like got it down. And then I didn't end up being on pirate radio until I was in college. So learning to mix and DJ then, I was probably around 14, coming up to my 15th birthday. 14, because my parents bought me a DJ mixer, and then I got the turntables from my cousin. And then once I got to college, that's when it all sort of opened up. So I was just DJing at home by myself. No one really knew. Like a few of my friends from school knew, but no one really understood. No one else got it. And then it wasn't until I went to college and I did music at college, I was around other people that had similar interests. So there were a lot of MCs on my course, a lot of producers, but I was really quiet. I kind of kept myself to myself. And one day I was in a practice room because it was raining, and I brought my records with me because another friend that I'd made, he was a DJ, and he was like, oh, we'll meet up and we'll have a bit of a mix. So brought my records to college with me, and I'm mixing in this practice room. But the way it was set up, there were cameras in all the practice rooms, and you could view those cameras from the main recording studio. So the rest of the people on my course had gone into the main studio, and they were just flicking through the channels on the TV that show you the practice rooms. And then they got to the channel that I was on, and they were like, what's he doing in there? Is he DJing? So they all came in. The door was behind me, so I didn't know that they'd come in. I opened the door, and I looked around, and there's like 7, 8 people all crowded in.
That's class.
And they were like, oh, like, we didn't know you DJ'd. And they were like, oh, you should come down to the canteen. Like every Friday, there's a DJ in there. And like people bring their records, the MCs jump in. So I did that. And then from there, one of the guys was like, oh, we need a DJ. Like we're going on radio. You're our new DJ now. And that was it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Out of just something that you're not even aware of as well. It's just like an amazing achievement. And I think it's funny how that works, isn't it? That it's almost like you could be trying super hard to achieve something, but almost at the time is like the time you least expect it. Yeah. That comes from it.
Definitely. I feel like the universe works in mysterious ways with stuff like that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, I really like that, how you kind of kept it almost like to yourself as well.
Yeah.
You know, you just were like, I'm going to just try this thing out. And
do you know what it was? Like, I remember being in school and I thought DJing and music and all of that stuff was like just the coolest thing ever. Yeah, like to me, cool. It was like, it doesn't get better than this. But everyone that I went to school with, they thought it was not cool at all.
Really?
Yeah.
It's interesting how it's changed, isn't it? It's almost like it's like a super cool thing now, I think. But
like I was seen as like nerdy. Like I came in, I remember sitting so clearly. I remember sitting in my like form time, teachers doing the register. And I've got a copy of DJ Mag that I bought on the way to school. And I was looking in the back, looking at all the decks, being like, oh, if I save up however much money, I might be able to afford to get these decks or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the person who was seen as the cool kid in my form was like, what are you doing? What's that? DJing? Oh, you geek. You play music. You listen to, and I was just like, yeah.
Yeah. What do you want me to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry if I like committed a crime or something. But yeah, like it just wasn't seen as cool. So that's maybe one of the reasons I kept it to myself. Like that same friend that I went to the record shop with, Kamal, shout out Kamal. He was like the one person that like still to this day, like that's how we communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Like we just send each other tunes.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's moved to Amsterdam now, and we won't speak for like a few weeks, and then he'll just randomly pop up and send me, "You heard this tune?" And I'm like, "No, actually, it's a banger."
Mm-hmm.
But that's you need people like that, people that are going to share music with you, and that's how we sort of spent our time in school. Like I remember him having Garage Nation on tape, and we absolutely battered that tape. But at the time, it just wasn't the cool thing. Later on, as like just as we were starting to get to the end of school, that's when people were like getting into other things that weren't top of the pops.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And did you find with your dad's sort of like background in it, what was his reception to it?
Oh, he was like super supportive, like my biggest fan. He he was really super supportive of it all. And he saw it as, if I'm at home sort of playing music or DJing or whatever, at least he knows where I am.
Mm-hmm.
He knows I might be making noise, but at least I'm in the house and I'm safe and I'm not out up to no good.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got to a stage where I was starting to take it more seriously, he was the one that was like, if you're going to do this, do it with everything that you have. Don't do it like half-assed.
Mm-hmm.
And I know him and my mum probably regret this, but if I was ever at home practicing, he always used to say to me, don't practice till you get it right. Practice till you know you can't get it wrong. Like practice it until it's like breathing. It's second nature. So when you do have to go and perform, or you've got to, like, you're put on the spot, you're not worrying, you're not doubting your ability. You just go straight into it. So yeah, he was like first in line to support.
That's quality. And has he been to any of the shows that you've done as well?
No, he never got a chance to come to anything that I played at. He did like early gigs.
Yeah.
But not anything big. My mum did. So I closed the main room at Ministry of Sound.
Sick.
And had my mum and my older sister in the DJ booth.
That is class.
Which is pretty cool. Like, it was funny. It was like, I look behind me, my mum's there, my sister, and then Hannah wants Jess Bay's Low Stepper.
That is awesome.
Like, all of them just raving it up in the booth together, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
It's a nice experience. Like, I've only ever been behind the decks if I've like filmed something.
Yeah.
And even then, it's like, it's kind of cool, you know, you're like, oh, I'm behind the decks. And it's like, it's little things. So the fact that you're able to show that to your family is a really cool thing.
Like, it was cool because my mum always used to say to me, like, through like growing up, like especially like school time, GCSEs and stuff, she was like, if you paid the same level of attention to studying as you do to music, you'll pass everything. And I was always like, yeah, but it's not the same. It's not the same. It's just not interesting. So to be able to do something like that, it was almost like, see, this is what it was all for. Like, this is what I was working towards.
No, it's such a good point. Like, to have that sort of tangible thing that you can show, because a lot of the time when you are practicing and you are just like working away on it, it can feel like a slog, and the curve that you're on isn't always visible. So I can totally see why that resonated.
That's why, I don't know, I always say to everyone, I say to everyone, I remind myself as well, don't obviously have goals and focus on those goals and try and achieve them, but focus on getting to that goal and the journey as well, because that's the bit that, like, if you're not enjoying that bit, then what's the point?
No, 100%. And would you say then that, just coming back to that idea of the music that influenced you, has that changed to what you're playing now?
Um, I wouldn't say that it's changed. It's definitely still there. Like, I'd say garage is always at the center of it in some way. Although I do play like a lot of house, you'll listen to the kind of house that I play, and there's definitely like a garage influence in there, whether it's in the groove of the drums or like chopped vocals, that sort of thing. There's always like that undertone of garage, but it's definitely branched out. And I think that that's important. If you're doing any sort of creative practice, there needs to be evolution. If you're stuck doing the same thing that you were doing from day one, then maybe you need to reevaluate
Definitely.
what it's about. So like, I mean, it depends on where I'm playing and on what I'm doing. But I think more than anything, it's the art of DJing that I like. I love music, but I just love playing around with music. So I might hear something in a hip hop track or a drum and bass track and go, oh, that sounds really cool. How do I pull it into what I do? So if I play a set, like I played at Ministry the end of last year, and although I knew the night was going to be very much house orientated, I was like, I want it to be me. So it was a lot of house tracks, had that garage influence, but then I'll pull in sort of some hip hop acapellas and a few vocals from other stuff, and then loops from maybe classic house tracks, those sorts of things, just to keep it interesting.
Yeah, no, that's sick. I think hip hop acapellas or vocals in general can go so well with electronic music.
Yeah.
I went to a set by a DJ called Mulgrab.
Yeah.
I went to like two, I think I've been to twice to see him. So good. And he like was like so like focused on using that at one point in his set, and it just sounded so good.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I think I personally, I don't know about you, but I feel like that's like it's like a genre that's not quite fully evolved yet. I feel like you could totally see more of that coming, you know?
Yeah.
I was like Drake, he made like that album that was like house music, or like Fred again, he's using like Future in his tracks, things like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool, you know. Obviously it's like it happens, but and that from a commercial perspective.
I feel like the more things evolve in terms of technology, the more sort of crossover we're going to see. Because before you didn't really get that, because we didn't have things like Spotify. So if you were into a certain subgenre of music, you knew exactly where to look for that music, and you'd listen to just that. So like, to reference the record shop that I went to growing up, in there they only sold sort of underground dance music. So their main bread and butter was garage, and then they had jungle and drum and bass. You'd get a little bit of house in there, and that was it. If you wanted hip hop, R&B, whatever else, you went to a completely different record shop. But now, because we have Spotify and all these streaming platforms on our phone, you don't have to invest the same amount. You've got your subscription for the month, and it lets you listen to absolutely anything. So then you can cross over. You can go, oh, I like house music, but actually there's this hip hop track. Let me check that out. And I think a lot of people that are in the industry are starting to realize that, and they're going, okay, I'm making hip hop, but house music is really popular at the moment. What if I delve into that? What would that sound like? So it's just like an amalgamation of everything, which I think is pretty cool.
It is cool. It's definitely changed the way we consume music. Even as recently as like,
not that I like Spotify.
Well, this is this is the thing. It's convenient. That's all it is. I mean, it's even changed as much as when we used to pay for music individually, you know, and then like tracks. Now it's like this, and just on that idea of how we consume music. Obviously, it's in our pockets, but you mentioned the record store quite frequently in your influences. Is that what prompted you to create Dubs and Shrubs? Is that something that
so do you know what? Shrubs and Dubs, it was
Shrubs and Dubs, sorry, I've written it down the wrong way around.
That was that was something that just grew out of lockdown. So my wife and I, my wife, she's someone that just doesn't do anything by halves. She has an idea, it's happening. And it was lockdown, nothing was happening. We were walking the dog, and she'd started to pass the time. So basically, we'd moved into this flat, and we had loads of plants, and she wanted some nice plant pots, and she couldn't find any. We did so many trips to home base and B&Q because that was the only place you could go.
Yeah.
And she couldn't find any. So she was like, right, I'm just going to paint my own. So she started painting these pots. They looked pretty good. And I was like, you could probably sell those. And she started putting them on her Instagram, and it just snowballed.
Mm-hmm.
So she started a page specifically for that. And then as it was coming towards the end of lockdown,
Mm-hmm.
she was like, I don't really want to go back to work.
Yeah.
I'm not enjoying my job. And she was saying that she'd been toying with the idea of maybe like doing a pop-up store and seeing how that goes with the plant pots. And she was like, but I don't think it would work just that because it's quite saturated. And then I was saying that I've always wanted to have a record store. And then she was like, well, why don't we do it together?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, actually, that could work.
Can I just say, to be able to do that with someone is amazing. Like, I think that's really just music aside, and you know, just to have that relationship is really nice.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, she's incredible, and she's the only person that I think I could ever do something like that with, because we balance each other out in that sense.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I've always wanted a record shop, and then we were literally walking the dog, and I was like, oh, we could call it Shrubs and Dubs.
Yeah.
And then once we had the name, it was kind of like,
I love that name.
We have to. Yeah. We were like, we have to do it now. And we had that conversation maybe on, I don't know, I think it must have been a Sunday. And then I came to the studio on the Monday. When I got back home, she had a list of places for us to go and look at. So and I was like, okay, this is
serious.
happening.
Yeah.
I was like, this is happening. And then we went to go and view a place in Hackney, and it was perfect. So, we were walking the dog, and it was Faye's idea initially because she wanted a pop-up store to sell the plants and the pots. And then I was saying that I always wanted a record store, and she said, well, we could do it together. And then that's essentially how Shrubs and Dubs was born. Like, walking the dog, and I said we could call it Shrubs and Dubs, and we literally just went from there. I went to the studio the following day at LSA, and when I came home, she had a list of places for us to go and look at. And we went and visited the first one in Hackney on Waterson Street, the top of Hackney Road. And that was it. It was the perfect spot, and it just kind of snowballed from there. Mm-hmm. We achieved a lot in a short space of time. Mm-hmm. So going into business is always risky, and a majority of small businesses fail in the first year. So to do everything that we did and have it running for 4 years, and it be our choice to go, let's stop this, I feel like we did extremely well.
Yeah. And I love the artwork on the page as well. I think that was really sick.
So the artwork on the page, I don't know if you spotted or noticed, but that's meant to be us.
Really?
So the record is me, Mr. Dubs, and Mrs. Shrubs is Faye.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Like characters.
Yeah.
That's really, really
so
cool.
At the last location that we had the store at Box Park in Shoreditch, we had someone come in and paint a massive mural on the wall in the back corner.
Wow.
Which is really cool. And it was Mr. Dubs and Mrs. Shrubs as well. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I suppose coming back to that idea of your initial experiences of a record store and how you were then able to give that to other people, that must have been quite a good thing.
Yeah, like that's what we wanted it to be. We wanted it to have that local sort of community feel, because that's what I experienced when I first went into record shops. Like if I didn't receive the reception I did when I went into Boogie Times, I probably wouldn't be sat here now. Mm-hmm. Like I walked in there in my school uniform, sort of 14 years old, they very easily could have laughed me out of the store. I
Mm-hmm.
could barely see over the counter. Like, I was one of these kids that grew up late.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked, even when I was 18, I looked about 14. So I walked in there and they were just like, oh, hey, like, what you do, you all right, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, can I listen to some records? And they were like, yeah, sure. And literally gave me a stack of records to listen to. And I was just getting into it. So I wanted it to be that when we had our store, people could come in and have a similar experience. They
Yeah.
might not know how to use a turntable, or they might not know all of the latest dance tracks or sort of garage tunes, but I wanted it to be that they could come in, feel comfortable, and either myself or Faye or whoever was working could go, oh, why don't you check this person out? Or why don't you have a listen to this? Or, oh, you've not used a turntable before. This is how it works. Not sort of pretentious come in and the person behind the counter thinks they know it all and makes you feel awkward and uncomfortable.
100%. And, you know, it's interesting as well about that. We're talking about like the way we consume music, and it's also relevant in the way that we socialize as well. You know, having that space where, you know, it's not as intensive as a club. It's not like a pub, but it's also somewhere you can enjoy music still.
Yeah, that was exactly it. So like, for especially like being younger, like I didn't know that much about clubbing when I was growing up. I kind of knew, I understood that DJs went and played in clubs and people went there and danced and whatever, but I knew that that wasn't a space for me because I was young. But a record shop, I could go there, I could socialize, I could meet other people with similar interests, and there's not really that many places where you can do that that are centered around music. Like you were saying, it's either a club, a pub, or something like that. Whereas a record shop is a lot more relaxed. You can actually speak to each other. Music's not booming. There's no sort of like pressure of like drinking and whatever else. So it's the perfect environment, I think.
That's sick. Yeah. And do you think you would ever kind of get up and running again in that capacity?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to go back to it at some point, but for the time being, there's a lot of other things that I kind of want to focus on. So it's really funny. So I remember when I was, well, how old would I have been? I probably would have been in college. And I remember having this notebook and writing in the notebook all of the things that I wanted to do as a DJ. And the way that I viewed it was I wanted to DJ, get on pirate radio, and then from being on pirate radio, I'd play events, and then from playing those events, it would get like national and then global, and then I'd travel the world. And then once I was bored with that, I'd come back and I'd open up a record shop and I'd teach. And it feels like it's happened, but in reverse. So the teaching at LSA, and then having the record shop, and then like I was gigging anyway, but then gigging and doing like bigger venues and the things that you always visualize yourself playing when you're DJing in your bedroom as a teenager. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I'd definitely love to come back to it at some point, because although it was a lot of work and it was stressful at times, it was really rewarding. And I think, especially with things like that, you sometimes have a go at it. You figure out what works, what doesn't work. You go away from it and you come back bigger and better.
100%. I think there's a huge value in undertaking something and then coming back with fresh eyes to it. You probably find that when you're making music as well, you know, like if you're like looking at it for like a prolonged period of time. But no, it's really cool that it's definitely still something that's on the cards, and you know, credit to you for that achievement of actually doing it as well, because like you said, it's a lot. What else have you got coming up in the future then? Obviously, if that's kind of on the cards, like you mentioned that there's things you want to do, like from a career perspective, like what does that look like?
Yeah, so like at the moment, I'm definitely focusing a lot more on myself as a DJ or an artist, whatever you want to say. So finally going back to production and making music, because I was doing it for years ago, producing, and I actually ran a record label with a good friend of mine years back, and that went really well. And then life just happens and things move on, and we stepped away from that. and I never really got fully back into production. So now that we don't have Shrubs and Dubs, I'm spending a bit more time like trying to get back in the studio, start producing again, and just DJing more, because that's at the core of it for me. Like, I think I always have been and always will be a DJ in some capacity. So just spending a lot more time doing that. And then, so started doing radio again. So radio was always like the center point for me.
You select radio.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's one of those things, like, as you grow up, you learn different things about yourself. And as much as I hate to admit it, I need routine. Like, I always thought routine was boring when I was growing up.
Yeah.
But I know that I definitely need routine and structure to a certain degree, because if not, I won't get things done, because I'll just float off and get distracted and do something else. So with Select, it keeps me anchored. I know that every week I have to be there. I've got to find new music. It's going to help me sort of stay sharp behind the decks, stay on top of whatever music's coming out, build content, all of that sort of stuff. So that's like the center point of everything. And then from there, gigging more. That's nice. where I'm at the moment. That's nice. what I'm focused on.
I like it. No, there's a, like you said, the routine is obviously like something you maybe think is a little bit dull when you're younger, but like there's so much value in it, like, and not a lot of value. So like, you can build around that. And I suppose just kind of talking about the idea of what you're wanting to achieve, do you have like a sort of North Star goal that you're kind of running towards? Like, if you were to get to a point that you were like, okay, I'm happy with this. Is there something you're visualizing, or are you just trying to like run with it?
Do you know what? It's funny you asked that, because I was talking to someone about this the other day, and I don't think there's anything in particular that I'm chasing towards. Like, I wouldn't say I've done everything that I wanted to do, because that's definitely not the truth, but I've achieved the main thing that I wanted to. The main thing that I wanted to do was to be able to get up in the morning and make a living from DJing. And that's what I do in various ways. So from teaching, from gigging, and sort of like doing consultancy bits with other DJs, like, that's my main thing.
Ultimately, sustaining your life through what you love.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Everything else that happens at the moment is a bonus. Getting to go and play at like festivals or a big club or whatever, that's a bonus, but it's not the thing that I'm sort of chasing down. It's being able to get up in the morning and go, do you know what? I love the fact that I'm going to go to the studio and play around on some decks for 6 hours and show someone something that if I wasn't stood here being paid to do this, I'd be doing it anyway. So yeah, I think that's it.
No, I love that. And I guess with that, then, so you are doing kind of, you've almost like ticked that key box you need for like your happiness.
Yeah.
Would you do anything differently looking back, or are you kind of
Yes, I'd definitely do something differently. I'd be a lot more consistent a lot earlier on. That's the one thing that I'd change.
I like that, because you know what you were mentioning about the creative evolution, I think is really important. But I think the hard thing is the consistency.
Massively.
You know, that evolution that comes with time, but it's almost like if you're not being consistent, you can't really evolve in that way.
No.
So I think that's a really good point, and it's something I think a lot of people just battle with every day.
Massively. Because I mean, especially when you've got a passion that is, I don't know the right way to put this, but like, I know before I was doing this full time, I had my day job and I was DJing on the side.
That must have been hard.
And that was the thing that I wanted to spend all of my time doing. But obviously you've got a day job and then you've got other commitments. Some people it's family, girlfriend, children, whatever.
Yeah.
You've got these other commitments that as much as you love those people and those commitments, you want to spend your time indulging in the thing that you really love.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's things that are well out of your control that will pull you away from it, and it makes it hard to be consistent.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it hard to build routine. So yeah, like there's that to battle with, which is why not everyone can be consistent. But the way that I tackle it myself is just doing little things. So like small tasks. If I've got, so I always say this when I'm doing lessons at LSA, like if you've got a mix to record, rather than go, right, I'm off on Friday, off on the last Friday of the month, I'm gonna sit down, I'll download the tunes, get them in record box, practice and record. That's too much for one day. And the likelihood of that happening is going to be pretty slim. So spread it out across the month. Find 5 tracks a week for the first 3 weeks. That's 1 track a day. On the weekend, maybe a Sunday, you mess around with those 5 tracks. You do that every week. And then the last Friday of that week, or whatever day you have off, that's when you pull it all together.
Yeah.
And then you've achieved that task through loads of little tasks.
I like it. Something I've tried recently this year, 2025, is that usually I would be like, oh, I need to say go to the gym 3 times in a week, and I need to go 3 times next week, and then I'd find if I went 2 times in a week, I'd be like disappointed that I've not done 3. So rather than do that, like sort of like, weekly thing, what I've tried is like break the year into 6 months and 12 months. And within the 6 months, I've said to myself, right, I'm going to go boxing 15 times, and then I'm going to go to the gym, maybe say however many. So rather than like holding yourself every single week, it's like, well, I have 6 months to go 15 times. So if you don't do 1 week, you have, and it's just about that shift. And like you were saying, breaking it down. Yeah. It can be a like really revolutionary way to helping you achieve that.
Yeah. I think it's the best way to approach it. It puts a little bit less pressure.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. And that's, I tell you, I'll be completely honest, that's why I do radio. Because I know that it kind of holds me accountable for it. Because when I don't, I know for me, all it takes is like 1 month to not do something, like that regular DJ mix. And I go, I didn't do it last month. And then I'm probably going to miss it this month. I just won't bother doing it. And then it doesn't happen anymore. So yeah, I need to find something where I'm basically going to be held accountable. If I'm not there, it doesn't happen. Or if I don't show up, it's going to cause issues. It's going to put people out. And I don't like that. I don't want to sort of cause issues for someone else or put someone else's day out because I didn't show up.
Yeah, no, 100%. And would you say then, in kind of this journey that you've been on, is there anyone that like stands out to you as like a mentor or a sort of like person you look up to? Obviously you mentioned your dad was someone who influenced you, but in terms of maybe, it can be your dad for this answer, but in terms of like that career element, like is there anyone that's helped you, or have you found that you've very much done it on
definitely my dad, without a doubt. I say the person that's helped massively with like the consistency in the organization, Faye, my wife. But in terms of like career journey, DJs that I've looked at, I'd have to say EZ, because he's just the Don. Like, but he's also like, so I've met him on a number of occasions, and every time I've met him, he's just been the nicest person, most down to earth. Like I met him years back at, there's a club in Basildon, and he does an event every New Year's Day, Z Uncut, and he was doing it in Basildon. And I went down there and I met him, and he gave me 2 records and a CD. I've still got both the records.
That's sick.
And he was like, he knew that I was like starting to DJ, and he was like, oh, like stick at it sort of thing. And then I met him a few years later at a club in Crawley, and he was playing, and I was playing one of the other rooms, and I was there, and he saw me, and he was like, "Oh, like, what are you doing here?" I was like, "Oh, I'm playing." He was like, "Oh, well done," sort of thing. But yeah, like just the way he sort of carries himself, and the way that, I don't know, if you talk to anyone of a certain age in the UK, there he's the go-to DJ.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's just got that status. One for like his technical ability, but then you never hear any stories of him like sort of behind the scenes and people going, "Oh yeah, mate, he's Eddie." And he was like,
Oh
do you know what I
yeah.
mean? It
Yeah.
just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So people like that I sort of look up to, because I'm like,
Yeah.
you're obviously doing it in the right way.
Yeah. And I could totally imagine how like some people can maybe be like not blinded, well maybe blinded by like that success,
Yeah.
but also like they're maybe not as down to earth. And
Yeah.
you can imagine that it's like probably quite difficult to deal with. I ask this question at the end of the interviews, and I feel like I'm gonna know the answer to this one.
Yeah.
But what would be your dream back to back be, and where would you do it?
Ooh, dream back to back. So someone asked me the other day, where's one place that I'd really want to play? And I actually said my house. Like,
That's cool, man.
because
Yeah, I like it.
like
I like
that
it.
that to me would be like a perfect gig. Like, I
You can
mean,
go to bed after it.
yeah, like what's not to love about that? But
Yeah.
no, like just not even like in my house, all of my best mates. Like I much prefer like that intimate sort of like house party vibe, rather than a huge sort of super club. Like I feel like you lose
Yeah.
that connection with
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. No, 100%. Sorry, I was just gonna say like that because I went to that, what's it called again? It's in Soho, and it's the Stormzy's club, and he's like
Oh yeah,
turned it into a house party. It's making me think of that because I used to think to myself after I went once, I was like, that would be such a good venue, like somewhere in the UK. So no, but so you were thinking in your house,
Yeah.
would be a good spot.
So like the way that our flat is laid out, it's got a mezzanine level, and I've got my deck set up so it looks over into the living room. So we've already got the perfect dance floor.
This sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
I feel like this could be like the launch for this, you know?
Just make it happen.
Yeah, why not?
In terms of dream back to back, that's a tough one. I don't know. I mean, like EZ would be the obvious one. That'd be cool. I don't know. I'd say, I honestly don't know, DJ Craze, but I'd probably just stand there in amazement the whole time and not actually DJ. There's, the list could be almost endless. Maybe Todd Edwards, because just love his music.
Yeah, it's cool.
I honestly don't know.
No, that I think that's a good answer. I think it's good. I think there's a few names there that I could imagine being a pretty cool lineup. But no, thank you so much. I think I've really appreciated your honesty and your depth in the way that you mentioned your influences and things you did differently and how things went with your business and all this insight that you've given is really greatly appreciated. And I think like going back from that initial influence is like a really, really cool influence to have, from your dad's just a sound system to the record store. I think it's a really nice path that you've been on. And then I think that your goals are great as well. And I think that based on like everything that you said, that it's only more is going to come in that way, for you. And I wish you all the best in that.
I really appreciate that. And thank you for having me on. Like, it's great to just sit and chat. Like, I could ramble on for hours.
I'm saying this to you right now. I'm like, I could talk to you for like 2 hours. There's like probably longer, probably like 6, because there's still stuff that I feel like I want to know more about your story. And like, it's just that way where like you're saying, you can just talk about that type of thing. And it's nice to reflect as well.
Yeah.
It's nice to look back on that journey.
I feel like that's something that doesn't happen a lot, like especially for people in a lot of creative spaces. So not just like music, but like art, fashion. It's always this chase of what's the next thing, like what's the next project, like I've got to move on to something else. And you don't always like take stock and look back on what you have done. So like when we were talking off camera and I spoke about the shop, like it's been how many months now? What are we, February? So we closed in August. And so what's that, around 6 months maybe? Just over? Just
I
under?
would say so, yeah.
Maths is terrible. But yeah, that feels like so long ago now. And we were talking about it and it's bringing back all these memories. And I'm like, you need to actually hold on to those things and not just breeze past them and move on to the next thing.
100%.
But yeah, if you ever want to do a part 2, just
I'm here for it.
Give me a shout. I'm always down.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure.
Cheers.
Just to start off, I saw you were DJing in Booking Club 1869. How was that? Was that just like, whereabouts was that, and what was the?
So it's in the Renaissance in King's Cross, in the big sort of Gothic looking hotel. Serious Harry Potter vibes in
Nice.
there. Yeah, it's really cool. So that was through an agency that I'm on. So it's first time playing in there. I'm back there again next week. But yeah, it was pretty cool. The only thing is the ceiling is super high in there. So the sound just reverberates around, but it's not a problem. But it's a nice atmosphere, really chilled. It's one of those places where you get to play all of those really nice sort of deep house tunes that you can't play anywhere else. They're not right for the dance floor. Can't play them for too long on radio. So that's, I don't know, a little bit self-indulgent.
No, that's interesting. You got like perfect mix, because I suppose people are not like jumping around, but then at the same time, it's not like full on like sit down dinner. So it's a good mix, I guess. And I saw in your story, and it looked amazing. Like it looks really cool.
Incredible. Yeah.
Well, that's sick. But no, yeah, thank you. I was just really intrigued by that story that I saw. But